My pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, and many of you will recognize Simon Tripp, I believe, as Simon, who works with TEConomy Partners, has spent a lot of time in Indiana over the years on a number of different studies and reports that they have done for Indiana, for BioCrossroads. So he's very familiar with what's going on here. So he's the lead author of a report that BioCrossroads has commissioned to look at both trends nationally and locally around AI and our universities and how we're preparing the talent and future workers in this industry, which, of course, has been talked about in many ways today and very critical. So Simon, again, has been here a number of times. He's going to give us kind of an overview of that. The report is not published yet, but it's coming close. So it's my pleasure to introduce Simon Tripp, who has been here so much that he's on the verge of, he's certainly an honorary Hoosier, but if he's here too much longer, he's going to have to pay taxes. So I'm going to have to balance that approach. So welcome, Simon.
You gave me a chance, I would take it. It's a shot in the dark, but I'll make it.
I've been waiting to hear what the introductory music would be. I don't even know what that one was. I thought it'd be Beatles, Rolling Stones, something to go with the accent. Although we've had a number of different accents up here today, I think it speaks to the point that immigration is generally a good thing for the United States. I've been here since graduate school in 1984, became a citizen in 1995, started seemingly to sound Australian around 2005, and now I'm thoroughly confused about what I am. So I've been looking forward to giving this presentation because it's actually really nice when you're in economic development and you take a deep dive at a sector to come into a community and give really good news. Because I think what I'm going to present to you today is generally really good news for Indiana. As was noted by Dan, this is early preliminary findings. This is not our final report yet, but we're pretty far along to the point where we can certainly give strong conclusions in regard to what we're seeing. So just to sort of get us grounded, from our perspective working in economic development, skilled human capital tends to be the most important asset now that any place can have. And I think we're now seeing that whereas throughout almost history we've had English, communication skills, and mathematics as sort of the foundational capabilities that underpinned your ability to work in any other discipline, it's increasingly become the case that data sciences, data literacy, is now a third leg of the stool. And we're actually been very interested to see that the universities that we've interacted with within Indiana are not just thinking in terms of data analytics as a discipline or a vertical, but are treating it as a cross-cutting core competency that students across the academy have to have. It's exactly the right sort of attitude that we've seen. Data analytics gives that fundamental capacity now to understand, to process and manage digital information, which, as we'll see, is underpinning almost every aspect of business change in the future. I would add that to this group, we work in all areas of science and technology. I would say biological literacy in this century is becoming increasingly important too. When you look at the types of tools that can be used with gene editing, with CRISPR-Cas9, with potential for biological computing even, that may be the fourth leg of a necessary education for Americans moving forward. I talked about change and what we're seeing. We did a report 2 years ago for Indiana where we looked at your industry clusters and did a deep dive on forces of change that would be impacting your industries moving into the future. And what we see are sort of three main areas. The first being convergence. This is the tendency for traditionally separate industries or disciplines to start to bounce against each other and to find opportunities to work together to create new sectors or new ways of meeting market needs. The second area of change is the rise of disruptive technologies. whether those are in biological, physical, or cyber digital domains. Disruptive technologies have to be taken into account, and I'll talk a little bit about those. And then finally, these two, convergence and disruptive technologies, are really coming together and making possible these new business models, business megatrends, things like the on-demand economy or smart tech, for example, new sustainability models. I mentioned convergence. The convergence example I like to use that I think illustrates it most easily for people of what's meant by the term is digital agriculture, or some people call it precision agriculture. We've traditionally had these different sectors of agricultural equipment, companies like John Deere or Vermeer or Valmont in irrigation equipment, and the inputs companies, the seed companies like Corteva, Monsanto, Syngenta, Beck's Hybrids here in Indiana. And the digital companies were involved sort of around the periphery in regular business analytics, but now getting really integral with digital agriculture, where these three come into play and start working together with one another to provide completely new structures for delivering on-farm productivity. And that can lead to any number of different economic development benefits in terms of new venture formation, acquisitions, strategic partnerships, mergers, vendor relationships. But convergence is bringing some really interesting opportunities, but it does mean you need to get to know people who have traditionally been in adjacent spaces and have a different way of thinking often than you do. I mentioned disruptive technologies. In our report that we did for CICP, Central Indiana Corporate Partnership on Indiana's clusters, these were the different areas of disruptive technology that we saw most impacting industry in Indiana moving forward. And I think it's fair to say that you couldn't look at any of those and not see data analytics and into the future, artificial intelligence and machine learning and machine vision as not being important components of that. So for us, we see data analytics as being a cross-cutting core competency that is absolutely crucial for the future of Indiana in all of your business sectors, and will only become more so into the future. In life sciences, obviously there's two different domains, main domains that we see, and it was interesting to hear the lady from the venture capital firm earlier today talking, who obviously thought that same way, that it's really segments on two pathways. The use of data analytics in life science for fundamental and applied life sciences related research, and then the application to healthcare and clinical needs. But there's no shortage of opportunities for new products and inventions that can come through the application of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other advanced data analytics tools. So the impetus for our study was sort of recognition of this over these previous studies that we had done. Concerns being expressed to different powers that be in Indiana over, are we producing enough of the right sorts of graduates? Can we attract the right talent to Indiana? The skills of the universities are matched to what the applied expertise or challenge problems that companies want to bring. Are those a good fit to the universities here? So we did a deep dive on this. We've been talking to industry, we've been running our own analytics, and I'm going to take you through what we're finding. As I said, what we're really finding, I think, is generally good news. There are, of course, a number of headwinds and challenges that you face. I mean, there are already very well-established AI ecosystems on the coasts in terms of doing really fundamental science work in data analytics and algorithms. There's certainly some considerable competitors out there. But I really view this as a sector that's somewhat akin to what we saw with biomass and biofuels at one point, where states were sort of scrambling to try and do R&D programs in biofuels, when the reality was that they had the biomass and biofuels innovations would actually come to them. What we're seeing in AI is a lot of the tools and technologies are moving very fast. They're virtual, they're distributed. Often they're open source and available for your use. And so you don't actually have to be inventing the fundamental science and technology of artificial intelligence to be able to deploy it into life sciences business enterprise within the state. We did note a concern that a lot of Indiana's talent, and there are a lot of students graduating with data analytics skills from your institutions, are leaving the state. And we'll talk a little bit about a basic conclusion that we've reached in regards to why that's happening and what you could do about it. The other point I would make is that there's a great degree of diversity across Indiana in terms of the companies that you have and where they are on a continuum of analytics capabilities and readiness. And that's making the project somewhat challenging. You've got companies that range from a company like Cummins, for example, in the automotive space, that is really at the forefront of applying artificial intelligence and machine learning in their work. And there's other companies that when we talk to them, honestly, they're almost just getting into spreadsheets. So there's a great degree of variation. So although a lot of the current press and the attention that we see to artificial intelligence and machine learning is sort of on these really out there forefront applications, what we've tried to pay attention to, given that we're concerned with economic development in Indiana, is that sort of next 5-year time horizon and making sure you're building the right pipelines to supply your needs over the longer term as well. So we've really been looking at the AI ecosystem. What do you have here in terms of industry users and who need these capabilities, in terms of companies that are providing these as services or tools to your industries, and in terms of your academic and non-profit institutions and their capabilities in the space. One of the things that we built early in the process was a basic model of the structure and the continuum from fundamental research through to the actual launch and onto the market of products integrating AI and machine learning capabilities. Where we're really concentrating is in what's on this chart of the sweet spot between the orange and the green, which is really areas where you're in applied application, often of existing algorithms and open source tools. Also that being the area where the training of students is most needed, is in that application of fundamental understanding of data sciences to the applied needs of different industry verticals. As I said, what we found when we looked under the hood was that Indiana was actually very well positioned. We first of all just did a basic mapping exercise, just looking at the core in AI in computer science departments. And we found Indiana actually ranks 9th in the country in terms of the number of faculty that you have in pure AI disciplines. But then, of course, we had to spread that out much further because the activity taking place in this space goes way beyond simply a computer science department. It's endemic in engineering, in computational biology, in a broad range of different areas within academia and industry. What we found is actually a considerable depth of expertise that has been built and is continuing to be built here in Indiana. There's existing interdisciplinary institutes in advanced data sciences. The Purdue Integrative Data Science Initiative is a great example of a campus-wide initiative that is working to assure that students are introduced to data analytics no matter what college they're in. The Notre Dame Center for Network and Data Sciences similarly, and the IU School of Informatics, Computing and Engineering. The other pathway where there's a lot of graduates coming out is out of business analytics, typically run through the College of Business on the respective campuses. And then we're seeing some very novel and innovative, really deep training and immersion programs. A great example is the Data Mine at Purdue, where they've taken a hall of residence and students from across campus, no matter what department or college they might be in, who have interest in data analytics, in that living, working, learning environment, interfacing with each other, learning You know, one student might come from biology and another student from computer science, but they're both interested in data analytics. And they're being brought problems from industry to work on in case study approach. Very innovative, and we expect that to be very effective. There's a number of different modular certification courses being provided. There's custom courses being developed by the universities for individual industries and individual companies. So we certainly have not seen what we thought, or what was hypothesized at the front of this project, that universities were behind in Indiana in this space and weren't thinking about the needs of the state. It is far from that situation. The universities are really on top of things, and we were very, very impressed with what we saw. There's no shortage of higher education programs that are bringing students to the state. Now, some of you in here who are from industry are probably thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, we're having trouble recruiting the people we need. We've heard that from industry. We can't seem to attract the talent that we want. There seem to be two main reasons for that. One is that Indiana companies don't seem to be engaging early enough with students in their academic training. We talk to students in the data mine at Purdue and other programs across the different campuses in the state, and they're being hit by companies from out of state in their sophomore year. In some cases, their freshman year. They're already being recruited into internships because companies want to build this relationship. None of the students we talked to had talked to Indiana companies early on at all. Most of them were getting approached sort of on career days and later on in the process. So certainly getting engaged with the students much earlier than you might have traditionally done is very important in the data science space. The other area was salaries. People were getting paid considerably more to go to Chicago than they were to stay in Indiana. And if you've got student loans, that sort of thing matters to kids, even though the cost of living might be considerably higher. They don't always see that, and the grass looks greener where the higher salaries are. We also looked at where there were research strengths, and I won't read this long list, but as you can see there, it is a fairly long list. There's considerable depth and breadth of research taking place within the research universities across a broad range of application areas. The major research universities, there's overlap, certainly if we did a Venn diagram of this, but there's also differentiators too for each of the individual universities. Notre Dame is doing a real push on ethics and artificial intelligence that I think is going to be a really important capability for the state into the future. IU has incredibly deep high-performance computing capacity and capabilities. And Purdue, of course, is engineering related capabilities, Internet of Things capabilities. One of the things we did in the analysis is our senior economist comes from a machine learning background, so we applied it ourselves to try and see where there were clusters of activity in Indiana. So we were able to identify 3,000 research papers that had AI or machine learning or advanced data analytics focus to them that had at least one Indiana-based author at the time that publication was published. First of all, there was certainly significant growth, over 122% growth from 2010 to 2018 in terms of publications, as you might expect in that space. Purdue was the largest generator of papers in the space, followed by IU, and then IUPUI and University of Notre Dame. What's interesting on the right-hand side is the disciplines that those journals that these publications came out in are primarily categorized as, and you can see it's certainly not all in computer science. Electrical, in fact, electrical and electronic engineering comes out number one, and there are a number of different life science-related disciplines in there. So I said we did machine learning, so I don't expect you guys to read this. It's rather complicated, but basically we use latent topic analysis on that complete data set, feeding in the real text data, and having it go to work using machine learning to cluster these into distinct groups. And what we really see on here is those two big clusters in the middle are sort of the core of data sciences. These are the classification and prediction problems space, algorithms used as decision support tools. And then that large pink cluster on the right is adaptive learning solutions, machine learning, basically. And within that, we were seeing applications in proteomics, in genetic sequencing, on the machine learning side, and on the classification side, more of the sort of population health risk factors type of data. But then a number of sort of periphery areas show up in the analysis as well, and a number of those are life sciences based. Predictive oncology, screening, image analysis, and biomarkers, a distinct cluster of activity taking place here using AI. Risk modeling in terms of cardiovascular health and infection. Clinical decision support tools utilizing various electronic health records, and drug discovery and high throughput screening and models. So if those are areas you're interested in, there are faculty doing considerable amount of work in these spaces that you could attach to. The question becomes how do you identify them and how do you connect to them? And that's one of the strategies that we're going to be working on. So what we've concluded as we've done the work is actually Indiana suffers more from a connectivity issue than it does a capability issue. There's a considerable generation of graduate output from certificate level through bachelor's degrees, specialized bachelor's degrees with majors in data analytics, on through master's degrees and PhDs in data analytics and associated disciplines. What's happening is a lot of those students, though, are going out of state. The vast majority of those students are going out of state, and many of them never even looked at Indiana companies or were aware that there were Indiana companies interested in them and their capabilities. They're in high demand and they're being proactively recruited. So this is the key challenge for us to address. We've also found that Indiana stakeholders, a lot of the big companies, have naturally gone out of state to Stanford, to MIT, in some cases Georgia Tech, places that had sort of a high profile in this space. But actually, the reality is that here in Indiana, at your universities, you may well have found people with very similar capabilities that would have been somewhat easier to work with than flying 3 or 4 hours to get to the respective coasts. We were seeing that most of the university engagement within the Indiana industry today in this space was fairly small in terms of the types of projects being undertaken. That is changing. We're seeing some of the large companies doing some very significant joint projects now with the universities. And many of the university initiatives, the data mine, for example, I think it's just on its second year at Purdue. So some of these are very good programs, but they are relatively new. And of course, there's an awareness lag. And so we need to figure out ways to connect that. So the missing element that we see for Indiana is this shared community of interest involving industry and academic partners, coordinating and communicating their strengths, their interests, and also getting the talent, the student body, actively involved in understanding the opportunities and being involved in projects and internships. There's a variety of models that we've started to look at. Whoops, that one isn't it's supposed to have a whole series of check marks in each of those boxes indicating which. So basically, we're just building a matrix that we're now considering in terms of what are the different types of models for industry-university partnerships and access to student operations that have been tried elsewhere. So we've been looking at Columbia University's Data Science Institute, what's happening at the University of Waterloo. We looked at MIT, Berkeley, Sloan Kettering, and a number of different institutions. And they each have their own sort of different models and ways of working on this. So right now we have this out with the universities, and we're asking them which of the models they've found fit with their corporate culture and their institutional culture. And we'll be developing sort of hybrid models based upon proven models from elsewhere, but that are fit to the characteristics of Indiana to meet this industry-university engagement need. We feel good that that can take place. Indiana has a lot of experience in building collaborative models. The CTSI of course, is one example of that in the life sciences. The Indiana Biosciences Institute now stood up and growing, and the Indiana Innovation Institute as well, which was launched in 2017. So you have the ability to put these collaboratives together. We don't know yet what the model is going to look like. We're certainly not all about just taking the elements from each university and trying to squish them all into one big institute. The faculty, they have their responsibilities for teaching and other activities on their individual campuses. So we need a model that can bring industry's needs to them. It may be a hub and spoke model. It may be that we need something in Indianapolis as well that can act sort of as a triage center to send you to the right people. But what we want to try and do in Indiana is make it as easy as possible for those of you in industry to get to the right people at the right time who understand your individual needs. And that might be a tenured faculty member, a real expert in high-end algorithms. It might be a non-tenure track research faculty member to work on a more pragmatic issue. It might be graduate students to work on your problem. But we're trying to figure out what's the best structure to make that happen. We also have to, as I said, we're working across platform, across industry verticals. So we have to set this up in a matrix approach so that how it structures meets the needs of manufacturers who are in a different space than those of you in the life sciences are in, a lot more robotics and automation related process activity and supply chain activity there. Precision ag space, again, another different set of needs. So we'll be tailoring the process to meet those individual verticals. It doesn't, of course, have to be only about industry working with academe when it comes to solving your industry problems using outside parties. Certainly some of the very advanced level activity may need engagement with faculty. Some of the basic work on simple problems might be good to engage with students. But there's also that middle ground of working with private sector companies, and you are building a base of successful service providers in the advanced analytics space. A very good example is Onalytics, which I should think quite a few of you here are familiar with. That's grown in South Bend. It's basically a spin-off out of Notre Dame. Now at 190 personnel, basically doing contract services in AI and advanced analytics and readiness assessments for companies. And they originally thought they'd only be working for small and mid-sized companies that would have trouble going to the big guns like Deloitte, et cetera. But what we're actually finding is their capabilities are proving very attractive to very large companies who've now started to use them. And then there's other companies that are more specialized, data to discovery, for example, that's spun out in Bloomington, that's purely focused on application of AI to drug discovery. And a number of other companies, including some who I've heard stood up and asked questions today, such as HC1, for example. There's also, we look for in an ecosystem, a good set of community events. And you're not without them in the state. You have the IU Network Science Institute's events that take place. Indie Big Data is probably the biggest of the types of events that you can attend. There's the IU PUI School of Informatics and Computing holds a colloquia series here in Indianapolis, and the Kelley School of Business. Upcoming in November, early November, will be the Purdue Integrated Data Science Institute Summit, which I think should be a particularly interesting one to attend, given what we see they've been doing. So all told, it's nice to be able to deliver a positive message of what we're seeing in Indiana. Some of you, your own individual experience may not be that as positive as this. My guess would be it's because you have not done that early connectivity, or you're simply unaware of what there is here. That's not your fault. You're busy people. And it's up to institutions to tell you what they have as much as it is for you to tell institutions what you need. And so we need to build a structure to do that. And that's really what we're contemplating now with the model. So our initial sort of strategic considerations as we now move into the strategic plan stage of the project is to be looking at talent, ways to build that connectivity to talent from the universities, the need for custom education and reskilling for Indiana companies. A number of companies in talking to us said, we have the subject and domain experts here. who have some level of data analytics expertise, but really need upskilling in certain areas. So we don't need to recruit new people, we need to add training to those that we have. Building awareness of the academic competencies and also the internal consultative competencies that are being stood up within universities. So Purdue, Notre Dame, IU are standing up internal consulting-oriented types of operations to meet your needs in data analytics and also bring real-world problems and challenges to their student body to work on. And finally, also leveraging areas of strength for commercialization. We're seeing sort of several different opportunity areas here. If we look at the majority of AI startups that have happened in Indiana are mostly focused around marketing technology, marketing and sales tech. But we are seeing a growing cluster of companies around the healthcare related application, clinical applications as well, precision agriculture technology, and advanced manufacturing as well. So that concludes my presentation, and we've got 37 seconds for questions. Any questions? Hi.
IU School of Medicine. I was just so sad and listening to this. We have lost our phenomenal interns. They finished the PhD program at the IU School of Informatics and Computing and Biohealth Informatics, like JJ. And they were so talented. And I went on the journey with them with all their interviewing, all on the East Coast or the West Coast. And yes, they did need visa sponsorship. And that was so frustrating to me. These are talented students that did phenomenal work on our huge cancer data sets. And now we're on our third intern. And is there a way we can message with leadership in the state to realize that this investment of these kids that come from different nations, and they come here and then we lose them?
Yep. No, I think it is a recognized problem that the state does understand, and economic development organizations understand, and the universities understand. I just think that in this data analytics space, there has not been a natural go-to connectivity organization or engine that would drive that connection. And I think that's what's going to be needed at all levels, whether it's with students who are on visas to students who are from Indiana and still go out to the Bay Area or Boston. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.